Welcome back, darlings, to the podcast Life Looks Different Now. I'm your host, Slandy Noel. In this podcast, we focus on reading one chapter from the Bible every week, doing our best to decipher the Word of God, learning its rules, its laws, its principles, and apply them to our daily lives. Last week, we read from Genesis chapter 30, and from reading Genesis chapter 30, we learned that Rachel was envious of her sister Leah because we know that Leah was hated by her husband Jacob because Jacob never wanted to marry Leah. So he didn't like Leah at all. And God took notice. God blessed Leah, opened her rooms, and Leah had many children. However, Rachel had none. God made her barren for a while. We learned that Rachel ended up trading her husband Jacob's time for some mandrakes because at the time people believed that mandrakes help with fertility and Rachel was just desperate. We also learned that both Rachel and Leah decided to give their servants, their two female servants, to their husbands as surrogates. So these women were having such a terrible rivalry. They hated each other so much. They were in constant competition that they even gave their own husbands to two other women. It was just messy. Two sisters, two servants, one man, tons of children. But we also learned that God blessed Jacob. Jacob wanted to leave his servitude from Laban, his father-in-law, and they struck up a deal. And Laban tried to trick Jacob, but God made sure that Jacob was victorious, and Jacob ended up with plenty of wealth from that deal. Now, this week, we are going to read Genesis chapter 31. Now, Genesis chapter 31 is a longer chapter, so please bear with me. And as I'm reading it, I may make some mistakes with the names, with the words, and whatnot. Please be patient with me. Don't give up. Stick with it. And maybe even correct me, okay? And help me to have a better pronunciation. I will need your help in that. Help me out with this. So let's see what lesson lies in Genesis chapter 31. Now, before I go ahead to reading Genesis chapter 31, I have a favor to ask. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. As you and I are learning the Word of God, others want to do the same. So please give them the gift of knowledge. And of course, you'll also be helping this channel to grow and reach more people. Thank you in advance for your support. Now let's get on to reading Genesis chapter 31. Jacob flees from Laban. Now Jacob heard that the sons of Laban were saying, Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what was our father's, he has gained all his wealth. And Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah into the fields where his flock was and said to them, I see that your father does not regard me with favor as he did before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not permit him to harm me. If he said, the spotted shall be your wages, then all the flock bore spotted. And if he said, the striped shall be your wages, then all the flock bore striped. Thus, God has taken the livestock from your father and given them to me. In the breeding season of the flock, I lifted up my eyes and saw in my dream that the goats that mated with the flock were striped, spotted, and molted. Then the angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob. And I said, here I am. And he said, lift up your eyes and see. All the goats that mate with the flock are striped, spotted, and mottled. For I have seen that Laban is doing to you what Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now arise, go out from this land, and return to the land of your kindred. Then Rachel and Leah answered said to him, is there any portion of inheritance left for us in our father's house? Are we not regarded by him as foreigners? For he has sold us, and he has indeed devoured our money. All the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do. So Jacob arose and set his sons and his wives on camels. He drove away all his livestock, all his property that he had gained, the livestock and his possession that he had acquired in Padanaram, to go to the land of Canaan, to his father's house. To go to the land of Canaan to his father, Isaac. Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household gods. And Jacob tricked Laban, the Aramean, by not telling him that he intended to flee. And he fled with all that he had and arose and crossed the Euphrates and set his face toward the hill country of Gilead. When he was told to Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled, he took his kinsmen with him and pursued him for 7 days and followed close after him into the hill country of Gilead. But God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream by night and said to him, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. And Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsmen pitched tents in the hill country of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, what have you done, that you have tricked me and driven my daughters like captives of the sword? Why did you flee secretly and trick me, and did not tell me, so that I may have sent you away with myrrh and songs, with tambourine and lyre? And why did you not permit me to kiss my sons and my daughters farewell? Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to do you harm, but the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. And now you have gone away because you've longed greatly for your father's house. You long greatly for your father's house, but did you not steal my gods? Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid, for I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. Anyone with whom you find your gods shall not live. In the presence of our kinsmen, point out what I have done that is yours. Point out what I have that is yours and take it. Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. So Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the tent of the 2 female servants, but he did not find them. And he went out to Leah's tent and entered Rachel's. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in the camel's saddle and sat on them. Laban felt all about the tent, but did not find him. And he said to her father, let not my lord be angry that I cannot rise before you, for the way of women is upon me. So he searched out, but did not find the household gods. Then Jacob became angry and berated Laban. Jacob said to Laban, what is my offense? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? for you have fell through all my goods. What have you found of all your household goods? Set it here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen, that they may decide between us two. These 20 years I have been with you. You ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, and I have not eaten the rams of your flocks. What was torn by wild beasts I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it myself. From my hand you required it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was by day, the heat consumed me, and the cold by night, and my sheep fled from my eyes. These 20 years I have been in your house. I have served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been on my side, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night. Then Laban answered and said to Jacob, the daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks. And all that you see is mine. But what can I do this day for these my daughters, or for their children whom they have borne? Come now, let us make a covenant, you and I. Let it be a witness between you and me. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. And Jacob said to his kinsmen, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap. And they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jagar Shadu Ta, but Jacob called it Galid. Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me today. Therefore he named it Galid. And Mizpah, for he said, the Lord watch between you and me, when we are out of one another's sight. If you oppress my daughters, or if you take wives besides my daughters, although no one is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. Then Laban said to Jacob, see this heap in the pillar, which I have set between you and me? This heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness, that I will not pass over this heap to you, and you will not pass over this heap and this pillar to me to do harm. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judged between us. So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac, and Jacob offered a sacrifice in the hill country and called his kinsmen to eat bread. They ate bread and spent the night in the hill country. Early in the morning, Laban arose and kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned home. So, as we see here, Genesis chapter 31 is another messy family chapter. This is quite an eventful chapter, you see. And this chapter demonstrates to us how the importance of family and the importance of choosing the proper mate, the importance of choosing the proper family to marry into. Now, we have to remember Laban is Jacob's uncle. Laban is Jacob's uncle on his mother's side. His mother, Rebecca, is the younger sister of Laban. And we have to remember that Jacob's father, Isaac, and his mother, Rebecca, sent him to Padanaram to go back to Laban's home and find a wife. Now, what they did not take into consideration is the fact that Laban is a very tricky man. Laban can be deceitful. Laban is for Laban, as we can see here from all the chapters we have read so far. Laban is more concerned about his own well-being than anything else, okay? So the chapter opened letting us know that Jacob has grown more wealth. He has gained more wealth. And then he started hearing some rumors. He started hearing the complaints of his brothers in laws. He started hearing them, the sons of Laban saying that Jacob had taken all of their father's wealth, meaning that Jacob had taken all of their inheritance, right? And of course, Jacob, upon hearing that, Jacob is like, wait a minute. I haven't taken anything that I haven't earned, because really Jacob has worked, he's worked for Laban for 2 decades, 20 years. So everything that he has, he really earned it. He worked hard for it, right? But his brother-in-laws didn't care about that, right? Like, you don't really, when you are looking and you realizing that some of your wealth is being depleted, or it's being, naturally people have a tendency to believe that, oh, it's unfair. This person is coming and taking what's mine. When in reality, that wasn't the case. Jacob earned it. He really worked hard for it. He earned it, right? And upon hearing that, he became very concerned, and he's like, wait a minute. So, and then he started noticing that Laban no longer favored him. Laban no longer liked him. Laban was really upset with him in some way, and Laban was treating him differently, right? He no longer regarded him with favor as he did before. So he started noticing the difference. He started noticing the shift from Laban. And then God appeared to Jacob and told Jacob to go back to Canaan, to go back to his father's homeland, to go back to Isaac's homeland, because that was very important. We have to remember that land was the land that God had promised to Abraham, Jacob's grandfather. You see? So it's really telling him, God is telling him again, you need to go back. And Jacob chose to obey God's instruction. Then he called his wives. He calls both of his wives, Leah and Rachel, in the field where he was working. He had his wives come and explain the whole situation to them. He told them, we have to go, we have to leave, we have to move to Canaan, I have to go back, and I can stay in this land. And Jacob is reminding his wives how he had served their father for all these years, how he has been honest in his dealings with their father for all these years, yet their father had always been very, deceitful towards him. So much so that their father changed his wages 10 times. 10 times. In the 20 years that Jacob has been working for this man, he has changed his wages 10 times. He had said, he could get the spotted one as his wages, but then when he noticed that more of the sheep were giving birth, to spotted sheep, then he switched it to stripes. So he's been tricking him. He's been very deceitful over the years. So Jacob is reminding his wives of that whole shenanigan. And he said, nevertheless, my God, the God of my father, of my ancestors, still bless me despite of your father's attempt to cheat me from every turn, every chance that he gets. And of course, he was trying to convince his wives. And then he continued on telling them, look around, look what's happening here. Look how we are being treated. But we can see here that his wives were like, yeah, you're right. We know that your father, our father has been very deceitful to you. We have been noticing how he has treated you. We understand. So both of his wives agreed to leave Padanaram to move back to Canaan. And then the ladies said something, because you can see, even despite of their rivalries, even though these women did not like one another, because they were envious of one another, because they were sisters sharing one husband. That's a tough situation, right? Their father had put them in that situation. And then we hear the ladies not only agree to their husband's statement, agreeing to live with their husbands, they didn't ask. I mean, they basically said, we stood to inherit nothing from here because our father has regarded us as foreigners. Our father doesn't care about us. He basically sold us to you. He doesn't care. So what do we have here? There's no need for us to stay here. There's no inheritance. There's nothing for us and our children. So there's no need for us to stay in this land. Off we go. We are gonna follow you. You are our husband. You are the leader. Wherever you say we need to move, that's what we're gonna move. And both ladies acknowledge that yes, indeed, Jacob earned his wealth. And this wealth needs to stay in their families and passed on to their children, which is very important. They understood that. They understood whatever their husbands was earning, whatever amount of wealth he was accumulating, it was for them, it was for their children. And then we learned that when Laban was out in the field with his own sheep, with his own flock, his daughter Rachel waited for him to be gone. Rachel, Jacob's favorite wife, right? The wife that he's always wanted. She waited for her father to be gone, and then she went into his house and took his idol gods. She stole from her father. Now, we don't know why, Rachel did that. Maybe it's because Rachel felt like these gods will also serve her well. Because we know that Rachel obeys her husband and follow her husband's, faith. But maybe because she has grown up in her father's home with all these idol gods, that she feels like maybe she can get some blessings from that. Or maybe she stole, these gods from her father because she feels like her father really admire these gods, and that was the most valuable thing that her father has, and she feel like, let me repay him for what he's done to us. Let me repay him by stealing his most, prized possession. Who knows? I don't know. We simply, the word, the books here, the Bible simply tell us that Rachel went ahead and stole these idol gods. And the next morning, when, Jacob woke up, he got his household ready, he got his wife ready, his children, the camels, his flocks and everything ready to leave. His wife did not tell him that she just stole from her father. So he got all of his possessions in order, he got everything ready, and he just flee. He fled the scene with his family so he can move to Canaan. And once Laban found out that Jacob had tricked him, Jacob fled, right? Jacob did not even let him know that he was leaving. Laban pursued him. Laban took some of his kinsmen and he went right after Jacob. And it took him 7 days to catch up with Jacob. And once he caught up with Jacob in Gilad, he set up his tent just like near where, Jacob set up his tent. And then he went ahead and accused Jacob. He basically, he's like, he said to Jacob, why would you be leaving in secret? Why did you flee without letting me know that you were about to leave? Why did you take my daughters like they're a prisoner of wars, right? Like, because that's what used to happen at the time when war happens. The victor, the victor will always take all the, possessions that are left behind and all the goods that are left behind, including the women and the children, the men will be enslaved and so forth. So, Laban is basically saying to Jacob here, why did you do that? Why did you, flee with my daughters and my grandchildren as if, they're prisoner in some sort, or there's been, you taking them away from me. And then Laban accused Jacob of stealing his gods. But then Jacob responded to the first accusation. Jacob said, wait a minute now. I left in secret for fear that you might basically take my wives away from me by force. So he's like, I was afraid. I didn't want to lose my wives. I have all these children with them. And I was afraid that you were going to take them away from me. So that's why I left. But as for me stealing your gods, absolutely not. I would never do such a thing. Because Jacob doesn't even serve Laban's God. So why would he even bother with that? But then the text let us know that even before Laban got to Jacob, God came to Laban in a dream and warned him not to do anything to Jacob, not to even speak good or bad to Jacob. God had already made it very clear to Laban in his dream. And then Jacob said to Laban, of course, you are more than welcome to check our tents, check everything we have, and you'll see that I do not have your gods. I don't need your idols. I don't have them. I don't care for them. I don't have any of your possessions. And anything that you find that is of you, if you found them, whoever has taken them shall not live. Now, we have to remember, Jacob was not informed that it was Rachel who stole from her father. It was Rachel who stole the idols. So Jacob didn't know. So Jacob was like, okay, you know what? If you find them here, whoever had taken them will die. That's all there is to it. And Laban went ahead and searched all of them. Searched their tents, searched their camels, searched everywhere. He went to Jacob's tent first, didn't find it, went to Leah's, didn't find it, went to the servants, didn't find it. And finally, he's about to enter Rachel's tent. And Rachel, of course, knowing that she was the one who stole, these idols, I'm sure she was terrified because she just heard her husband say that whoever these idols have been found in possession of it, that person will die. And I'm sure Rachel was afraid to just even hearing that. So she's like, wait a minute now, what can I do? So she went ahead and she hid the little gods, little idol gods, in a camel's saddle. Inside of her tent, she hid them and then she quickly sat down on it. And so when her father, Laban, entered her tent to look around, he started searching everywhere. She said, oh, Father, I'm sorry, I can't get up to embrace you, to greet you, because, I am on my menstrual cycle. So I can't greet you. Not only is she still that man's, idol gods, now she's lying. I'm sure she was terrified. So of course she's lying. Because we have to remember, around these times, when a woman had her menstrual cycle, she was deemed unclean. And no one wanted to be around a woman. So women, when they're in the menstrual cycles, had to be away from everyone else. So, and she knew that. So she's like, I'm unclean. I can't come up to greet you. So her father did not even disturb her. She sat on the idols. Her father did not disturb her. And so and then Laban realized, okay, really Jacob did not take his idol gods. And when Laban came out and said, I did not find them, Jacob got very angry and started berating Laban, because he's like, how dare you? You come after me, you run after me. I'm trying to leave to go to my father's home, and here you are coming here and accusing me of things. How could you do such a thing? Right? And then Jacob reminded Laban that because of me, because of my servitude, because of me being in your household, you have been blessed. My God has blessed you. I've brought you only good fortunes, right? Over the past 20 years, I've worked for your daughters for 14 years to get your daughters' hands in marriage. And then I worked for my wages an extra 6 years. I've never taken anything from you. I've never ripped you off. I've never done anything wrong to you. But you have manipulated me. You have ripped me off. In fact, you have changed my wages 10 times. So of course, Jacob was very frustrated. He was upset. He didn't want to deal with it. He's like, how dare you come here after everything you've done to me? You still blessed because of me, and now you're accusing me of stealing from you. And Jacob was well within his right. Of course, he didn't know one of his wives took it, but he was within his right because he's never, the text has made it very clear that Jacob has never taken anything from Laban. Jacob has worked for everything that he has. Then we learn that Laban offers to make a covenant with Jacob because he's like, in some way he's like, you're right, I understand. But it is like, you have to remember, these daughters are my daughters, these grandchildren are my grandchildren, all these possessions, everything you have belongs to me. But your God has already come to me and told me not to say anything to you. So I'm going to let this go. So we can have this covenant. Let's make a covenant. And they decided to gather a heap of stones as, to really set up the covenant. In front of their kinsmen, everyone was a witness to this. And Laban said to Jacob, may God be my witness. May all of this be between, whatever happens here is between, for your God to see this, to witness this. And he then said to Jacob, may you never mistreat my daughters. Right? And God is a witness to that. As they're making this covenant, Laban is asking for him not to mistreat his daughters. Now, it's interesting. I suppose, that's what makes us humans so complicated. Because, when I first read, Genesis chapter 29, my thought was just like Laban was just this terrible dad and he doesn't love his daughters and so forth. But the more I read these chapters, the more I understand that he really wasn't, he was just a human being. He was just a man, nothing perfect. He figured, he had to trick Jacob into marrying Leah because Leah needed a husband. Leah couldn't be left unmarried. So he did whatever he had to do. And then now he married off his second daughter to the same man as well. So many of us may look at it and say, okay, it's unethical, it's disturbing, it's disgusting. But the truth is, this man did the best he could with what he knew. But then we can see that he does love his daughters. Because if he didn't, he would have never said to Jacob, may you never take other wives besides my daughters. May you never mistreat my daughters. He cares for his daughters. And he wanted to make sure that his daughters were treated, with respect and dignity and fairly. And he could see that, okay, his daughters now are not only Jacob's wives, but now the servants too are involved in all this. And he's like, Laban is like, that's plenty. You don't need any more women because I don't need my daughters to suffer anymore. And Jacob agreed. And Jacob swore accordingly. And Jacob said, as God is my witness, I will not do that. And then they ate bread together, which is beautiful. Early the next morning, Laban blessed his daughters, his children, his sons, his grandchildren, and then he left. This chapter is a very interesting chapter for several reasons. This chapter, again, like I said before, at the beginning of this, of this podcast is like, families matter, family matter. The family you marry into matter because, Laban is a flawed man, just like Jacob is flawed, is a flawed person. But, the fact that there was so much animosity within the family, the fact that they just couldn't understand that they are one, no matter what, because at the end of the day, whatever wealth Jacob has acquired, it's not for Jacob, really. I mean, it's for his wives and his children and his children's children. So had Laban been able to see it that way, there would have been less animosity between the family. There wouldn't be so much, jealousy and problems. And it goes to show you that it's so important for when you are choosing a mate to pay attention to the way the families interact with one another. If you're gonna marry into a family and you notice there's a lot of animosity, people are always fighting one another, jealous of one another, that might not be the best family to marry into. Because you see, when you marry someone, you don't only marry them, but you marry their family, you marry their baggage, you marry everything that comes with them. So we have to be very careful with that. But what I do like about this chapter is how, even though things were messy, even though we know that Laban had tricked, Jacob several times, I love the fact that finally Rachel and Leah had come to an agreement. They had a better understanding what was happening here. They both realized that they were both victim of the whole situation, that indeed at this point they need to start thinking of their children and the children coming after them. So they made a decision to support their husband, to leave Padan and move to Canaan. I love that. I love that very much. And I love that Jacob trusted God. Just like his father before him and his grandfather before that, he trusted God and said, if God tells me to move, I move. And he did just that. God had told him to leave and go back to his father Isaac's home. And that's exactly what he did. He obeyed. He obeyed. And which resulted in Laban even opening up his eyes and saying, okay, this is not a man that I can touch and do whatever I want with, because he's blessed and God has protected him. And even Jacob has recognized that. He's like, I would have been poor if it wasn't for God. It's beautiful to see that. And I love the fact that at the end of the chapter, Laban has some redeeming qualities. He's like, wait a minute, I don't want my daughters to suffer any more than they need to. So make sure that you don't take any more wives. Human beings are so complex. Just when you think that you have figured them out, they show you a different side of them, a softer side of them. That's beautiful. I really love that, because Genesis is really reminding us that all of us are flawed. All of us are wicked in so many ways, and all of us fall short to the glory of God. But by the grace of God, we are redeemed, we are saved, we are loved. God got us not because we are worthy in any way, but because he has chosen us, because he loves us. I love that. I love that a lot. So I hope that you yourself have learned something new from Genesis chapter 31 this week. Please leave a comment, and let me know what your thoughts are, on this chapter. I want to hear from you. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. I really appreciate your time. I hope you will have a wonderful week. I'm praying for you. I'm thinking of you. And until next time, darlings, bisous.